The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Welcome back to another D-Link webinar, the first of 2020. As it were, it's probably a bit late to wish everyone a happy new year, but I'll do it anyway. So happy new year to everyone out there. So we're back again, and I'm joined as always by Craig Kirby, our technical pre-sales engineer.
Hi there, everyone.
Craig did his last webinar without me. He did it with the very capable Rob. So I feel well out of practice. This is my first one for a couple of months. So I'll probably lean on Craig more than normal for this one. But I'm sure he's up for it. So today's session is basically focusing on small medium networks. There's a very popular blog post on D-Link.com which gets a lot of traffic from people looking at either refreshing their network or just building a new network from scratch. So
yeah, it's one of the hardest things to do, actually, when it comes to thinking about the whole topology and what you have to start with right from the beginning. Sometimes it's a little bit daunting, but with a few of the key things to look for, hopefully after this webinar, that you'll feel a little bit more confident with where to begin, at least.
And that's why we employ Craig. Okay, so let's kick things off here. Right. Just a quick update on the product portfolio. You may recognise this image before, but there's a few new entries coming up for 2020, which we're quite excited about. Obviously, Nucleus was the big thing in 2019.
That's
We've
right.
got a lot more coming down the line in regards to Nucleus.
That was just the start for our Nucleus. It's going to be an ever-growing, ever-expanding, scalable solution. So that's really where the core of our company is going. And then obviously we'll still have our consumer products. And as we've seen over the last couple of years, we've integrated those right into the cloud as well with the My D-Link platform. So this is just an overview for anybody new to D-Link. We always like to start with this slide just to let you know what we do. We're not just a switching vendor. We're not just this. We're not just that. We're a bit of everything. And that's really important when it comes to building a whole refresh of a network. A lot of people will go in with one thing and come out with another, because it's a way of opening up and exploring new ideas and ways that you can get more things connected.
Yeah, so some of the bits on here that we're particularly excited about, there's some Wi-Fi 6 products lurking there, the cover units and the routers.
Yeah, so mesh products and business mesh in the
looking
future.
Good. Yeah, business mesh. Yeah, big one.
So right now it's consumer mesh is where people are moving for Wi-Fi. And we're going to be a big player in that as well. And then obviously we'll always have our accessories for the business side of things as well, for making sure that you can actually connect all your devices as well.
Some very nice new cameras coming soon. We're planning a webinar in a few sessions time once some of these cameras are on the market to give you guys a good overview of those. A new pan and zoom, a new outdoor camera with an incorporated flashlight, which sounds great, and a few 5G products coming as well, including an outdoor and indoor unit.
Absolutely. So this is going to be the year of 5G, I think.
Indeed.
That's really going to be the big thing.
Indeed, yes. And we're hopeful that we can get those products out there, and I'm sure they'll be great.
Let's crack on it.
Right. Switches. No 5G today. We're here to talk about switches, as we very and often do. And this is a slide that we always leave in. The first few are always just like a reminder. I'm pretty sure that most people on here know what a switch does, what it's for.
That's
but
right.
It's always good to give a reminder, especially when that reminder comes from Craig.
It is. So what do we use switches for? It's not just switches we're talking about today, by the way, but what do we use switches for? Plugging things in. That's really what a switch is. Plugging more things in. And you can go right from an unmanaged switch right down on the bottom to the biggest layer 3 switch right at the end. The end result is exactly the same. It's plugging more things in. Now, how you do that is why you start looking at different switches, and then how they connect together is why you start looking at different ways of connecting them. So whether it's a standard copper cable or a fiber cable, and the speed of the fiber cable and how you get those speeds. That's really the big differences, and that's what we need to examine when we start looking for a network refresh. So it's really important just to have a basic understanding of what a switch does.
Yeah, and I mean, the importance of the next slide just underlines just how important a switch is. When you think that you can plug everything that's in here into a switch, your phone, your VoIP phone system to provide power, your computer to get a nice wired connection. Just everything on this slide just illustrates just how the connectivity of the world is basically growing.
And in a business environment as well, even more so, really, because right from the point of entry, so let's say, for example, you're driving into a building or a car park, you press the button to talk to someone, chances are that intercom is being powered by a PoE from a switch, connecting back to their network so that they can talk to you on their VoIP phone. That's very likely what it is.
Yeah. They underpin the whole network, as we always say. Craig briefly touched on the speeds there. I think it's safe to say that gigabit Ethernet is where it's at, but 10 gig is where it's going. In the broadest terms, I think.
You're spot on there, I think. So Ethernet and fast Ethernet are what we've been using over the last few decades, really. We call these copper connections because the cables in them are copper, right? Now, gigabit Ethernet is where we are, as you say. So we call it 1000 base T is the actual name for it. You get 1000 megabytes out of that, also called a gigabyte, right? So 1 gigabit per second connections. Now, when you look at a data sheet and advertisements, you'll see it say 10, 100, 1000, and that basically means it can change between them. Sometimes you do have to do that for older environments. So 1000 base T would be your copper connection, which would be a 1 gig link that you plug in, and chances are you'll have between 8, 12, 16, 24 of those, 48. Okay.
So, moving on to the actual building of the network.
Yeah, so this is going to be very different now. So we're not going to be discussing products per se.
Not yet.
Not yet. It's very difficult to think about where you start when you either had to do a refresh or a new build, because there's a lot to think about. You have to gather all your information first, and it's that information gathering that's the really hard part. The rest, once you've done it, and if you've done it right, it's pretty much self-explanatory. So what you need to start thinking about is what you want to do as a business, how many people are going to be in that business, and really start thinking about where you want to go in the future as well. Because it's not just about looking at your budget and what you can afford. You need to plan ahead, and you need to think about how long, ideally, the switches are going to be in, what you're going to be doing as a company, kind of data transfers that you're going to be doing at that company, and also what you have employed at the moment. Because a lot of people, it's mainly refreshes that we look at, more so than brand new builds. Yes, we do get them, a brand new hotel being made, but that's more rare than a hotel that needs to update its environment for hospitality, or maybe just a business where they've been running for the last 6 or 7 years in what I like to call a spaghetti junction cabinet, where someone's just pulled everything in, nothing's labelled up.
Yes, I've seen those.
And that's the hardest part. So we also have to think about the software that you're actually using too, because it does have to run across your company, the kind of data storage that you're going to be needing. And this is really just about looking at what you currently have at the moment, categorizing your infrastructure. So you need to think about, okay, switches. Do you want IP surveillance? Because IP cameras now, you know, the old coaxial are out, IP surveillance is in. So these obviously have to be powered by switches and things like that. Then you have to start looking at what you've already got in terms of your infrastructure map. Do you want your voice communications? And really start thinking about how much you've got, what you can keep. That will come on to the next slide.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important that you get this stage right, and from a Craig looks at this, saying this from a purely technical, from a business standpoint as well. The deep dive is about where are you going as a company.
Yes.
every person you bring into your business, laptop, phone, extra connections, extra bandwidth responsibilities. So it's very, very important that you're very honest about this and put this in line with your business plan. If you plan to have 20 employees by the end of the year and you've currently got 10, your network has to reflect that. So then sometimes you have to think even further, because if you want to grow to 25 employees the next year, you don't want to have to go back and redo another network, or you don't want to have your team struggle because you've got another 5 devices and 15 devices connected to your network with iPads and everything else. So this is a very, very important stage. Moving on to stage 2, the research, where Craig comes into his own again.
So let's say in the previous example, previous slide, what you've done is you've gone around, you've catalogued everything that you have, you've put down the software. Now it's time to actually use that and start doing some research. So for example, you've looked at your switches and you found, okay, is it unmanaged? Is it managed switch? What are the problems I had? And that's really what you have to think about. What are the problems that are being caused? Is it because your Wi-Fi is going down all the time? Is it because your guest networks, you can't do a guest network? Is it a flat network you want to get away from? Do you have security concerns and things like that? How do you start implementing them? So if you look at the switches, let's say you've got 10-year-old, 11-year-old switches, which we see in schools all the time. Usually a couple of times a month, I'm out at a new school helping them out, and they'll have 10 or 12-year-old switches. Now, these might be from different vendors. They might have a mix of different vendors. And what they generally do is they'll have a certain amount of switches that they purchased, and then over the next couple of years, they might try and slot something else in. It might be a different brand, different vendor. Next thing you know, they've got switches all over the place, not really linked. The network diagrams are all old. So now you're kind of getting this position where you start getting problems and you can't find where those problems are. So have a look at how many ports are actually connected. PoE, have you got access points that are connected up? How old are they? Is that really going to be a wireless requirement you've got? Is it going to be suitable over the next few years? Start thinking about PoE budget. So if you've got an old PoE switch, maybe it's managed. Great. If it's managed, can you keep it over the next few years? Possibly. You might be able to recondition that into another part of your system. So for example, we spoke about IP surveillance. You might not need a brand new switch. If you've already got a switch that's a few years old, it's PoE, that probably would be enough to run your PoE. If not, if you want something more managed, then you start looking at smart switches as well.
Sure.
So that's the switching side of things. You do all your port counts, you do all your PoE counts and find out how much data you need, how much PoE power you need, budgets that you need as well. You need to think about connectivity. If it's old, maybe you're running on some Cat5 cables. Maybe that's how they're linked. Maybe that data isn't enough to send across. Maybe you should think about fiber. So you can start investigating fiber prices, laying down new cabling, that sort of thing, and put that towards your budget as well. Then you have to think about if you're having new software, if you're integrating new hardware and things like that, new storage solutions, who's actually going to be running that? So you have to start thinking about how much money you're going to spend on staff training. Who's going to do the staff training for you? Can you get from a vendor training that's able to help you at the end of the day, rather than just leaving you alone and hoping that you'll just look at some support catalogs, right? Happens all the time. Definitely vendors out there.
Yeah, definitely.
And I like to say we're not one of them, where we just leave you in the lurch.
I hope not. Yeah. That all makes perfect sense. I forgot to add at the start, just quickly, if anybody's got any questions, feel free to type them into the side chat. We'll go through the questions at the end as we always do. Sometimes we'll get a few and we'll have to go away and then come back to that person. But if you've got any questions on today, just leave them aside and we'll come back to you. So moving on to the next stage. So you've done all your research. It's time to put all of that kind of stuff in action. I think as Craig mentioned as well, one of the things about D-Link is that we kind of we try and pride ourselves on how we help people out. That's part of Craig's job is to go out and do the site surveys. So if you don't have this kind of person in-house who can do this kind of work for you, obviously you can hire someone, or Craig's here for a chat, and I'm sure he'll be happy for me to try and promote his services out there.
Yeah, happy to sit down and throw a quick diagram together for somebody. It's not a problem to attain there.
Yeah, this is Craig's expertise, the plan.
Yeah, so the plan, this is coming from years of experience. I've been doing it for quite a few years now. Really, once you've got all that information about where you want to go in the business, start thinking about the kind of data speeds that you want. How much you can afford, how much there's a budget. Is there something that you're going to have recurring costs on? Can you afford a cloud solution with a subscription? And that by that you mean get rid of all the architecture, and you don't have to do things yourself in the cloud. That's the nice thing about it. You don't have to host servers, host software, host PCs, keep them updated, keep them backed up. But if you do have a team that does that, then you can also save on the costs of the cloud instead. So
because you've already invested in that infrastructure to start with. So we're not saying rip everything up. We're just, the cloud is a great solution.
Yeah. It's going to be very different from company to company. Smaller companies, they might want to think about cloud services because it means there's less monitoring, less load and things to do.
And storage.
Exactly. Storage can be
storage in the cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so switch-wise, we're probably thinking about the kind of, like I said, the data port speeds and who's going to integrate. One thing that you absolutely must do at every stage, which you probably should mention right at the beginning, is network diagrams. Get that information into a network diagram. Find out how the cables are going, what's powering what. Put that into a diagram. Once it's into a diagram, the rest comes very quickly because you can see exactly what kind of IP addresses that you're using, what kind of technologies are actually implemented. You've done your research into the switches. You know if it's going to be good enough for your management. And if it's not good enough for your management, then you can start looking at different switches or maybe something that can enhance what you've got. So, for example, you might have 3 switches, right?
Yep.
They might only be a few years old, but there might be maybe different manufacturers or something like that. What you could possibly do is link that into a 4th switch, and that 4th switch would be a distribution switch. Distribution switch will then control all of the VLANs, so it does all the management of those devices, and the rest can just be plug in and play, keep them nice and easy and simple to use. Your distribution switch can also then link back to your core, and the core and the distribution can have a link, maybe like a 10 gig link or even 40 gig link, depending on what size you go to, but they were talking about small business, so 10 gig link is probably what you're going to be looking at. And this can be a fiber link. It could be LACP, which is where you've got link aggregation. You run a few CAP cables if you can't afford fiber. So there's lots of different ways of increasing the amount of speed that you get on your network without actually having to reinvest in all brand new stuff as well. So maybe that's something you can do. Like I said, determining network's capacity, you need to think about how many guest users you're going to have at any given time. Think about how much data is going to be stored on that, how you're going to keep that separate security-wise as well. If it's cameras, you need to think about storage, how, is the hard drives going to be good enough? And then you can start piecing together that component list, and that will break down into a kit list that have all your transceivers, all your cabling, all the switches, the access points, define all your cameras, the model numbers that you can choose, and you can choose based on megapixel of the camera, for example. Maybe there's some places where you're looking at surveillance, something really important like a reception desk where people are going to be entering. You might want like a 4 or 5 megapixel camera where it's a little bit high resolution, you can identify the faces. Maybe you're looking outside in a car park and it's 100 meters away. You're not going to see the face of that person anyway. So maybe you could drop down the megapixel or something like that. It saves you some money, maybe you can afford an additional camera somewhere else. So there's loads of ways of doing it. And once you've got that on a plan, diagram it, get those floor plans going. We've got tools on our website that will allow you to use this plan and start building a bigger picture. So we'll have your storage calculators tells you exactly how much data you're going to be using, how much time you're going to be able to record, what kind of quality as well. That'll give you an overview of how much hard drive space you need. So that's one less problem. We've got floor plans for placements of the cameras as well, so you can actually place the cameras and kind of see where coverage is going to be going. access point heat maps we can do as well. So we can throw together a heat map for you so you can actually see based upon a drag and drop mechanism, drag in an access point, lower model. Does that going to broadcast to your area? Is it going to go through the walls? Maybe you put in a digger, more high-powered one. If it's in a school, you go on and on and on. Your tools are there. Use the tools that you've got and use the research that you've collected, and it will become much, much easier to build that plan before you start thinking about throwing money down.
Yeah, so all part of the VIP Plus club, all of the tools that Craig mentioned, and look, just to dwell on the determine your network's capability and the last point, that really does lean so heavily on the honesty and the thoroughness of the first stage, because you can think of examples where we needed a 20-person network. Well, what if you've got travelling salespeople and they're going to be in the office for one day? What if the Swindon branch is coming over to your Slough branch? Sorry, that's an office reference there. What if the Swindon branch is coming to your Slough branch for the day for a team meeting? Everyone's going to want to bring their devices with them. Is the whole office going to be on slowdown because you've got other people in there? So the plan links back to the deep dive, and everything that we're talking about in here is interlinked with each other.
Absolutely.
So yeah, and then actually doing it.
Yeah, actually doing it.
The fun part.
Yeah. So implementation is obviously one of the hardest parts. And that's really where you're going to have to think about creating your backups. So what I would recommend, if you're thinking about putting switches in and you're thinking about doing it yourself, configure the devices before you do anything. So have an idea of how they're going to be configured. Set it up as a test workshop. Put it on your desk. Most of these can run on a desk, no problem, before they go into a rack. And then you'll be able to start actually creating all of your settings and testing things out before you actually implement it. Always test. It's really important. You can start creating backups.
Yeah.
Before you touch anything on your current network, you back everything up. Absolutely. Do not touch anything until you've collected all of the backups.
Well, that's just an important lesson for life in general with your computer. Even if you're doing a presentation on PowerPoint, back it up. As we found out prior to the webinar.
Absolutely. So disaster recovery plan. What we do at D-Link, especially with our switches, is we do forms of redundancy. So we factor in ways of doing it. So we might have a plan that has multiple stages, and at the end we'll have a kit list. That kit list might have 2 or 3 different versions. One will be a very affordable version, which might not have so much redundancy, and at the higher end scale we might have a really redundant system where we've got lots of links. If any one of these data points goes down, we've always got something else. We've always got a device that's ready to take over from that device if it fails. And then you have to sort of...
Very important.
Yeah, exactly. And then you start breaking it down to what you can afford, what you're realistically going to be okay to get away with, and then we can factor down to that final solution, the final kit list where it's affordable for you, but also has as much redundancy as you can afford or think you need.
Well, I always use the example because prior to me working at D-Link, I worked for a small company and we hired out an office at the local Regis. And a couple of times while we worked there, the Wi-Fi went down. Everyone just went home. So you lost a whole day of people working because the Wi-Fi in the building had gone down. And because some of the offices were internal, you could sit there on your phone, but it wasn't a great scenario. So building up your redundancies, or even looking at a 4G router solution is better than better than nothing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
In those cases.
And there's even ways of doing wireless redundancy. People don't realise you can do wireless redundancy.
No.
So if you want to place in additional access points, what you can actually do is turn the power down on those access points and have them overlapping each other. And then if one fails, the other one kicks up.
Brilliant.
So it's something we can do as well.
Very nice. Very good.
So finally, plan for your next upgrade cycle as well.
You've just finished and now you've got a plan for the next one.
That's right, it's never ending.
But it's the same as everything, isn't it? It's like your financial plan. We finish the budget for 2019 and then you're working on 2020 and then you're thinking, well, what am I going to do for 2021? And whilst it might not be that your next upgrade is going to be next year, 5 years, however long, but you start the planning as soon as you finish the old one.
Well, that's right. And the thing is, you don't have to replace everything at once. There might be some key components that you've identified in research where if you update those parts, it will be much easier to update the rest in the future.
Sure.
But you can do that gradually in your own time.
Well,
it's not too
if
essential.
you've got an old camera system, you can implement your new switches network and then replace the cameras as and when the system goes through. As we said about you can come and buy some of our nice spanking new 5 megapixel vigilance cameras, or you can stick with what you've got and then
Absolutely.
Right. So we're just going to quickly touch on the different kinds of switches. I mean, we've been through this slides a few times. I think in the past, but it's always good.
2020. We need a quick refresher for us.
Unmanaged switches. We wouldn't really recommend for a business.
Well, unmanaged switches for a small medium business environment, they do have a place. Usually used on the edge.
An edge. That's exactly what I was going. You wouldn't really use one of these as the core. You'd want a smart switch at your core, and then you could use it as
correct.
Some of these on the edge.
For a small business, if it's small, then it might be something that you
they
can
do
consider for a couple of PCs to add in your future. What we do recommend is a managed solution.
Yeah.
Please look at smart switches, because that way, what you can do, if your business does grow, you'll be able to start doing things called VLANs, which is a virtual LAN. What that means is you can start segregating your network. So you can say,
smart switch slide.
One company. So, for example, you might have a company that's maybe it's a floor, even like a business floor, and then you'll have another company come in at the second floor. You can use the same equipment, but then you can provide different LAN completely.
Sure.
Same way you can have like an art department if you're in a bigger company. And you might have an accounting department, and those would be two different.
GDPR, isn't it? It's fantastic for GDPR because you can keep HR separate from sales. You can keep that employee data on a different network to the data that other people can access just in case. And those GDPR fines are fairly hefty, as we talk about.
Absolutely.
The unmanaged switches and smart managed switches, they all come with the PoE and PoE Plus options, which is why Craig says that they can be used for the edge switches. And we do have unmanaged switches that go up to 26 ports, 1026.
We do. It's about 24 ports.
Yeah, so you can you can still use them. They can power all those cameras for you if you like. But because we're talking about businesses here that are on the grow, because we're talking about businesses that have aspirations, get the network that fits those aspirations and get yourself a smart switch. One above the smart switch is the managed switches range. Pardon me. So we do have some 10 gig smart switches, don't we? But
so BGS 1510s,
1510s, and the 1250s. But the 1250s, the newest ones we've got in the range, aren't we?
That's correct.
The only difference is they can't stack, but we'll go on to that in a bit.
So we mentioned about managed switches allow you to start segregating, and what you're also able to do is start putting in fiber solutions. So with the higher the switch, you can start putting in 1 gig fiber, 10 gig fiber, different speeds, different media platform.
I think the thing to remember with these is it doesn't. It's not so important about the size of the business. It's what your business actually does, and if you do need fast amounts of downloads. If you're a video streaming company, even if you've only got 10 employees, then it might be worth considering something like a managed switch with the 10 gig options, or at least one of the smarter options that are available. So let's move on to Nucleus, and we're going to talk mostly about the Nucleus cloud option. We've touched briefly on the cloud in the other slides before this one. So Nucleus Cloud would be a very good option for someone considering pretty much a full network refresh, whereas Nucleus Connect is more a piece of software that's available for some of the older switches. Not older, but some of the switches in the D-Link range, which can be upgraded with a new management piece of software.
That's right.
Which is which is going to be a good option for certain companies. So if we have a look at the cloud, one of the key points that we always push on the cloud is the zero touch provision. And that's great for a small business company because pretty much these will come pre-configured, or we can pre-configure them for you here and send them out to you, and then they are just plug and play. One of the best points about Nucleus Cloud, again, is the secure communication. We always talk about here the WPA3, which is the new standard in security that comes on Nucleus. And WPA3 is the next iteration, obviously, from WPA2, but just provides you with a little bit more peace of mind on those. So there's a couple of examples there. There's the 2 access points, a 2x2 and a 4x4, the 1210p and the 28p, and then we've got the range of switches on there now. All of these are readily available and would be a great solution for a small business or a network refresh, as we talked about before. To quickly touch on the Nucleus Connect now, because as I said, we were talking more about the cloud solutions here, but we have here's the range of access points which would be available with Nucleus Connect. Obviously, the new software cable management system, central management software will be available in all of these. We have the DAP 2620, which will be coming soon. That's
that's really good for hospitality.
That's what I was just going to say. The picture doesn't do it justice because it's quite a small unit as well, so it'd be great for hotels and other pieces like that. And you can just wall mount it in a hotel room and then have a fantastic signal for.
So what we generally find for that one, rather than doing big broadcast, smaller broadcast, more widespread.
Yeah. Okay. 1210 Smart Switch. As I said before, we were going through the Smart Switch range. The 1210 is really the it's the best selling range of switches that we have. It's a gigabyte Smart Switch, and it comes in with a variety of port counts from 8 all the way through to 52. We have the normal PoE versions, and then we have the max PoE versions available for each of those. And this is a real good, I think we described this as a steady workhorse kind of switch. Would you, Craig? Yeah,
absolutely. So really good for. Sorry, my throat's completely numb. just to let you know, I'm recovering from a cold. So what we find is that you might have an environment where there's lots of access points.
Sure.
Some of these access points actually require more wattage in order to run. And if you try to plug all of your access points into one switch, even though there's enough ports, might be not enough power.
Sure. Yeah.
So max powered switch, for example, would make sure that every port that you plug in up to a certain amount of PoE power means that those devices will be able to work.
Yeah, no problem. So moving on to the 1250. The 1250 is the newest of our 10 gig switches. So fairly new to market. It's only been around for about 6 months now, I believe. But it's really making some good gains in the marketplace. And that's because it's very affordable when you compare it to other companies' 10 gig versions. One thing that the 1250 does lack, and one of the reasons that it is more affordable, is that you can't stack these switches. But it does bridge the gap perfectly between the 1210 and the 1510 series, which we're going to talk about next. And obviously, the limitation of the stacking is one of the reasons why it's such an affordable.
That's right. This is really a sign of where we're going.
Yeah. So just touching on the 1510, we did mention that on the slide before. The 1510 is one step up from the 1250. It's a 10 gig solution, but it is stackable. So for those bigger networks, the 1510 is a great alternative. And then briefly, just to touch on, because if there is any companies out there who are real data monsters and really need their bandwidth, D-Link has a full range of managed switches. We generally talk about the 3130s as a good starting point for this kind of range. The 3630s sit above those. They're even more powerful, all the way through to the data center switches, such as the 3600 and the 5000 series. This is the sort of stage where, if you are planning a network, then you really should be calling on Craig when he's less, when he's available, when he's able to speak more. That is, anyway. So the 3130s are gigabit switches, and then moving through. But yes, we are here to help with a network if you need the kind of speed and what's the word I'm looking for? Not access. The sort of the functions and the range of services that you'd need from a fully managed switch. That's when you should probably get in touch with us and have a chat with Craig on that stuff. So just to sum up, because we've taken a lot of your time today. We obviously have to talk about we've talked about our range of stuff here, and Craig's availability if you do need any help in planning your networks. But why go to D-Link versus the rest of the competition? We have a long and storied history in the switches market, a lot of expertise in there, and that's led to us to be able to build a vast range of switches like the 1250s, which are a fairly unique proposition in the market. And we still have the very small options of the 5-port switches, all the way up to the 52 ports, unmanaged, smart managed, and fully managed solutions. All of them coming with a variety of PoE options, the PoE Plus and the Max Power options, all available. That obviously integrates into us being an end-to-end switching solution from edge to core. So your core switch may be a 1510, and then your edge switches may be some 1210s, or they may be unmanaged. D-Link can provide all of those for you. We're also certified by Tolly, which is an independent board on this kind of stuff. That's certified on most of the switches in selection. It's not on some of the older ones, but it is on the 1510s, for example. They're all certified. So we have been vetted independently by a recognised board there. Dedicated account manager and technical pre-sales. I've talked too much about Craig already, but we do have,
because Craig can't talk right now.
That's because Craig can't talk. But we do have a few dedicated sales managers for you guys. They're always available on hand for your questions, help you out with this kind of stuff, and give you the best prices, which I think is music to most people on this call's ears. The VIP Plus Partner Program, we did a webinar on this back in November, so it's well worth going back and listening to that again if you want to know more about the VIP Plus scheme. But we do have exclusive partner programs, discounts, promotions, and you get a lovely email from myself every week telling you about webinars, telling you about our upcoming roadshows and training events. Craig and myself will be down in Bath on Thursday, doing a training session for the guys down there. And then we're moving on to Northampton on February the 20th. If you want to find out more detail on these training events, it's dlink.com/events. We're taking a small break from the training in March because we're going to be hitting the road. We're going to be doing some road shows across the country, talking about what's to come from D-Link, talking about 5G, talking about Wi-Fi 6, business mesh. So you'll get to see us in person on stage. So more than happy for everyone to register, come along. We'll provide some lunch, and then we're looking at some afternoon activities to make up for the fact that we've bored you about our products and networking for 4 hours. Again, we'll all be on dlink.com/events if you get a chance. We talked about the cloud management options, Nucleus Cloud, which is really where the marketplace is going here.
Yeah, cloud managed services for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And as I mentioned at the start, the portfolio, the range of switches, it really does allow us to really focus on small to medium sized businesses. Not just with webinars, not just with the offer of training, not just with roadshows and all that kind of stuff, but by allowing small to medium sized businesses to compete with their larger counterparts via the VIP Plus Partner Program. Giving you the benefit of our services, our tools, our planning devices, which can help you compete with the really big boys out there in the marketplace. And as we always mentioned, if you do have the opportunity, we do have an industrial or ruggedized switch portfolio, which we're keen to push out there. It's an area that we're seeing a lot of growth. Smart cities is the go-to thing at the moment. You're hearing a lot about, but everyone expects Wi-Fi everywhere they go now, whether they're outside. I mean, it's -2 when I left this morning, so I don't really expect to sit outside when it's -2 on my Wi-Fi, but I'd like to have the option if I can. So yes, D-Link's range of industrial switches, it's fully comprehensive, and we'll be doing a webinar on that again in the next few weeks, once Craig's recovered, because I can't do that one on my own.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Like I said, I've taken up quite a lot of your time. We haven't got any questions in the box, so I'm hoping that everything that we've done is fairly self-explanatory here. So, like I said, the next webinar will be on industrial switches. I'll be sending out emails or dlink.com events just to sign up for those. We'll be adding more and more all the time on more and interesting factors as we go through the year. And as always, we're always available. Just contact us at the email address on screen, uki-sales@dlink.com, or drop us a line. The number's there on the screen. Well, that's about it from me. So I'll say goodbye on behalf of Craig, who's still struggling slightly. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks very much for your time.